Hi, everyone. This is Talking Foreign Policy, a critical look at Canada's role abroad. And I am Eve Engler coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour has been going on for about, I guess, about 2 years, a little bit over 2 years. And yeah, it's a weekly update, critical look at Canada's role abroad. Thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. So a lot of developments came foreign policy, so I'll get right to stuff so we have some time to have a back and forth and comments and questions and the like at the end. A story I saw in Hill Times talked about how the Trudeau government is still adopting ISDS or FIPA, investor state dispute settlement in trade agreements, including in the recent one they signed with Ukraine, which is, of course, a negative development. Hill Times also had a piece about titled Global Affairs Canada Downgrades Chief Legal Advisor Role Despite Global Focus on International Law. And so they basically demoted the top lawyer in global affairs from what was a deputy, no, I guess a deputy minister, like on the sort of council of the top global affairs bureaucrats, to one step down. And of course, we know that the Trudeau government talks a lot about uh, the international rules-based order and all this kind of stuff. So it's a little bit contradictory, as the Hill Times pointed out, to be talking all about legal stuff and then downgrading the role. And the story speculated that it might even lead towards kind of almost sort of collapsing the whole department, the legal department at Global Affairs. In the story, they say that back, I think in 2013, they said the minister has legal responses to Global Affairs Canada mandate is, quote, to foster the development of international law and its application in Canada's external relations. Uh, I find that quite a fascinating piece of a mandate. I don't know like how much legal hold this has, but clearly the Trudeau government is not fostering the development of international law when it comes to Palestine. So I'm not sure how you can kind of hold them accountable to uphold this mandate. That it's not exactly clear to me what document this was put in Global Affairs Canada, but yeah, I don't know if you can just push it politically, or there's a way to actually sue the government for not upholding its own mandate about upholding international law. I'm not exactly clear, but I found that kind of an interesting um, uh, the fact that this exists. The story doesn't really give the full justification for why they're downgrading the legal position within Global Affairs Canada, and they clearly have many lawyers. Um, but the top lawyer that they're no longer going to be sitting on the sort of top body of the global affairs bureaucrats. Canada Files has a piece titled Canadian NGO Joint Statement Supports Canadian Foreign Policy Against Haiti. And it goes into this statement from these Quebec NGOs, mostly get Canadian government money, and they just are sort of going along with the government's position on the foreign intervention and the like. And this is a long-standing thing, as the piece points out, in the 2004 coup. NGOs played a really important role in justifying it. These Canadian government-funded NGOs, and they got very aligned with the educated elite in Haiti, the French-speaking, maybe 10% of what might be called the middle class in Haiti, but obviously 90% of the country is impoverished. This sort of educated sector, and we wrote a lot about it. The Canada-Haiti Action Network wrote lots about it at the time. So really saw how NGOs can be used as tools of imperialism. Haiti's the Republic of NGOs has been called. At one point, at least viewed as having the most NGOs per capita, mostly foreign funded. They responsible for school, so much schooling, health. It gives them a whole bunch of power in the country, and they were really used also very clearly as a political tool to destabilize the elected government. And one of the things, as I pointed out many times years ago, is that the definition of NGO was kind of like basically was like government sanctioned and government funded, kind of contradictorily, because of course non-governmental organization, but like Haiti Action Montreal and the Canada Haiti Action Network, which were clearly NGOs, were activist groups that were non-governmental. We weren't viewed as an NGO. We were viewed as maybe sort of like an activist group or solidarity group. But these groups that are getting Canadian government money for a role in Haiti, they were viewed as an NGO. They're also state sanctioned. They often have registered charity status. Anyway, so some interesting kind of questions there. But this article just sort of goes over how the NGOs are continuing to align with the Canadian policy in Haiti. There's a piece in the Globe, actually, I think it was from last Saturday that I only read a couple days ago, and it was Lloyd Axworthy apparently has a new book, and in this book, I think the title was the title of the Globe sort of not sort of partial review of the book was Canada's status suffering under Trudeau Axworthy. And the main criticism they're talking about is how they've been like too much turnover in foreign affairs ministers, right? Which is kind of odd because Melanie Joly has actually been in the position for quite a while now. And the idea that like the criticism of Trudeau's foreign policies has been too much turnover in ministers rather than a slew of different criticisms, most obviously right now of enabling a Holocaust in Gaza. Just kind of tells you all you need to know about Lloyd Axworthy. Lloyd Axworthy was the best end of Canadian foreign minister, maybe one of the best ever Canadian foreign ministers. And a couple of weeks ago, somebody got in touch with me who was about to interview Axworthy to say, like, do you have any, Axworthy is framed as this benevolent, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, landmine treaty, da 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 da, and can you give me any sort of counter information? So I just punched his name into the Black Book of Canadian Foreign Policy and maybe my Canada Africa book, I forget, anyway, a couple books, and got a little bit of some stuff that he was involved in. And the guy who got in touch with me was very surprised by it. For instance, with regards to Indonesia and supporting Suharto in the late 90s, while the genocidal campaign in East Timor, Axworthy even sends his letter to Suharto when he's about to come to APEC, saying we're going to do everything we can to basically deter protests if you come. Obviously, Canada continued to deliver weapons to the Indonesians while there was actually a movement in this country opposing it. They had go back into the decades of different forms of kind of Canadian complicity. But even when there was a more of an activist movement in the mid 1990s, and actually there was foreign minister, Canada continued selling weapons. He justified the American bombing of Sudan in 98, where they bombed the pharmaceutical factory that then it destroys the vaccine, not the vaccine, but the treatment for malaria. It's thought that tens of thousands of people probably died because of a lack of malaria treatment subsequently. And of course, Axworthy very much is right at this, part of justifying and enabling the 1999 bombing campaign of Yugoslavia or Serbia. So Axworthy's got this kind of kind of liberal aura to him, and I think it's not, in one sense, it's not incorrect. I think he is on the better end or the best end of Canadian foreign policy, foreign ministers. But that's damning with faint praise, right? It's these people who get to these positions are supporters of imperialism, supporters of the U.S. empire, in the case of Axworthy, with like a little bit of reluctance here and there. Puglisi has a piece in the Ottawa Citizen: Canadian Forces monitoring personnel's social media accounts in Operation Codenamed Fence. So monitoring forces, this is not new. There's a piece in the Hill Times, which I didn't read, but Dimitri Lascaris posted about, and La Presse is a kind of somewhat similar piece about Canada's submarine purchases. And the plan is to buy 12 submarines. We're talking about 75 billion. The La Presse story says 60 billion, but possibly it could end up doubling that. What the La Presse kind of hints at it, like what these submarines are for, is a bit unclear. I think it's not unclear when you know what Canadian foreign policy and military policy is about. It's about projecting power alongside the U.S. empire. But what role they would really play in, from a defensive standpoint, that's a different story. But another huge purchase. The Journal de Montréal had this piece about, they list about six, there's a 2-page spread about 6 different of these major arms purchases. And they list the stated amount of money: the F-35, the surface combatants, light armored vehicle purchase, drones. There's 2 others of, we're talking about huge money. They don't actually list the submarine. If with the submarine ticket at 60 billion up front, that would put, I think it was about 140 billion for the other purchases that are all kind of like in the works right now. And put the submarine, I would put it towards 200 billion. That's the upfront, right? That usually it's about 3 times that in life cycle costs. So there's this huge outlay going on in the Canadian military. And again, this money could go to other social uses, like building housing or preparing for ever worsening climate disturbances. On Russia and the NATO proxy war, a couple of stories this week. Russia's clearly made a bunch of advances in Donetsk. There's a big piece in the Financial Times. They do that daily. They have the long piece just for the op-ed page, and it's all about titles: Russia consumer spending boom, and they're basically talking about how good economic things are in Russia. And so really the sanction stuff has failed. That comes across quite clearly from this piece that the Financial Times is writing. Online, this person pointed out this new poll from the National Democratic Institute, the US government funded, saying that majority of Ukrainians, 57% versus 38%, support peace talks with Russia. And the individual says that once government, so Zelensky, maybe 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, he suggested he would be open for peace talks around, potentially, land is ultimately. And as this person on X points out, once the government signaled that the idea is no longer mortal taboo, people's private opinion began translating into public. So long as it was like, you couldn't state that officially within media or official politics in Ukraine, most people's willingness to have peace talks and maybe negotiate some end, maybe exchange land, unfortunately for Ukrainians, for an end to the horrors. Then of course the public's latent views come out, and now it's suggesting that quite quickly it's a strong majority. And the University of Ottawa professor Kaczynowski, he says that in fact, so these numbers are probably underplay it if you really get in all the people who are in areas that are controlled by Russia, and still the people's sort of hesitancy to state these opinions publicly. But you have the Globe and Mail's guy based in London. I'm blanking on his name. He has an op-ed in I think Saturday's paper. Canada should have the power to seize Moscow's frozen money. So he's doubling down on more of this sort of sanctions kind of aggressive policy, while admitting that if you seize, I think he says there's about 12 or 16 billion dollars in assets in Canada. he starts it off with that plane that's at the Pearson Airport in Toronto, and how it's just sitting there. It hasn't been seized. I think it's a Russian oligarch who owns it, and it's been kind of sequestered by Canada, but hasn't been sold off. And so he says that he even points out that once you seize the assets, they're no longer a bargaining chip for peace negotiations, right? Once you take them, there's that gives the Russians more of an interest to keep going, and even if you had a different government in place in Russia, as he points out, that if you don't have the assets anymore, you weaken your hand on that front as well. But nonetheless, he wants to seize it as further doubling down on this aggressive militarist sort of fight to last Ukrainian kind of dynamic. The Reuters reported on a Canadian warship transiting through the Taiwan Strait in what Defense Minister Blair said is Canada's commitment to a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. More of the same of Canada sending more and more naval vessels to disputed waterways with China, Philippines, Taiwan, etc. And this is part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. They're very open about this. Now, at the same time, the Hill Times published a piece that's kind of countering this and saying, the title is, "As Canadian exports to China continue to grow, is the diversification strategy working?" And so they say that in 2023, Canada's exports to China reached $31 billion, which was up 6% from 2022. And this is sort of like, there's like consternation about this, because we're supposed to be like cutting economic relations with China as part of this Indo-Pacific strategy, as part of joining sort of a more aggressive policy. And but the pull of the Chinese economy is too much, and far surpasses India or Vietnam or other sort of economic relations that would be designed to take over from the Chinese market. And so there's concern in the Hill Times about this, which I think is interesting. It speaks to the fact that it is really, in my opinion, I've stated this many times, but the business element is the business community just basically wants to continue with this economic relations, while the geopolitics and the militarist dynamic heightens up. They just want to keep making money, which I think makes complete sense from their outlook. On that note, the Unifor, which I actually used to work for 10 years ago, the union, a private sector union, there's a title, a piece, Financial Post. Union calls China a major threat to auto sector, and they're calling for like tariffs and adopting this sort of not accepting electric vehicles from China. And I don't have a problem with the union pushing for protectionist policies to protect their members. Obviously, the auto sector has traditionally been good working class jobs, pretty good conditions, pretty decent pay. Conditions, I think maybe not always great conditions, but unionized, certainly better than a lot of the factory work and the like. Now, what I do disagree with Unifor in this is that they then throw in all the Uyghur question, and they adopt this sort of like, apparently Xinjiang is a hub of a lot of aluminum. Aluminum, of course, is used in a lot of car manufacturing. And so they throw in the whole Uyghur question, how Canada's got to crack down on products from forced labor. And so they really echo the whole, Mike Pompeo hyping up of the, so-called Uyghur genocide and the like. That's unfortunate. Now, Unifor, they had Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau speak at their convention a couple of years ago. I wrote about that. So they clearly are fine with following the sort of establishment line on foreign policy. Yeah, so there's that. The Financial Post published a piece titled "Canadian Miner Moves to UAE as Bar Raised on Foreign Investment." And this is a story that I've been talking about a lot about the business community, specifically the mining sector, getting very uncomfortable about the Canadian government undermining their ability to have Chinese companies buy minority stakes, maybe buy out the whole company, a little bit less extent, export to China. And that's all come with the whole strategic minerals question and all these more and more sort of geopolitical lens at strategic minerals and tied into the Americans. Of course, the Pentagon is now putting up money for Canadian mining operations for specific minerals in Canada. It's all about the China question. And so what this Financial Post story about this Canadian miner moving to UAE is about is basically that the Canadian government had blocked a Chinese company, which I guess has the technical skills around graphite. And so the Chinese company to buy a minority stake in the Canadian firm. Canadian government undercut that. And now none of this is happening in Canada. Okay, so this company's project is in Guinea, and its processing is taking place in Morocco. But the Canadian government, because it's headquartered in Canada, the Canadian government's been able to undercut its ability to have this relationship with this Chinese company. And so now it's moving to UAE. And so this was I think it was on the front page of the business section, big article. And so this is really a real issue that's, serious concern to Canadian mining industry. And again, Canada's a global powerhouse in mining. And so there's a concern that more and more companies are going to start being headquartered outside of Canada because of these restrictions. So it's an important issue of Canadian foreign policy. On Venezuela, Poilievre and the Conservatives have gone all in over the last few days. Poilievre's wife, who's of Venezuelan descent, wrote an op-ed for the National Post, saying Canada's going to get tough. Poilievre, Chong, the foreign critic for the Conservatives, says Conservatives call on the Trudeau government to quote, recognize the opposition won the Venezuelan election, cut off all contact with Maduro's authoritarian representatives, and sanction all individuals complicit with the subversion of Venezuelan democracy. And then Poilievre goes even a step further, really over the top language. I am calling on the Canadian government to recognize the opposition won the Venezuelan election, cut off all contacts with Maduro's socialist gangsters, kick out his diplomats, and hit him with brutal sanctions. So he's saying openly these are going to be, these sanctions can be brutal. We know they can be brutal. I don't know that Canada has the power to implement brutal sanctions on Venezuela, but clearly the US does, and they have. And so it's really, kind of over the top rhetoric. And you have people like Andrew Coyne, the CBC and Globe and Mail commentators or columnists, saying, retweeting, said, let Canada be next, after Peru officially recognizes Edmundo Gonzalez as president-elect of Venezuela. Now, Peru, of course, it has a usurper government after a Canadian-backed coup 18 months ago, right? So them recognizing the opposition figure in Venezuela is just, this is not an elected government in Peru. There's not even a pretense of being elected government in Peru. But this is where Andrew Coyne is at. Melanie Joly then posts something yesterday, I believe. This kind of like, we're going to get tough on Venezuela. It's obviously not as extreme as what the Conservatives are saying. I responded on X to it saying, basically, the Canadian government should restart diplomatic relations. It should end its sanctions. on Venezuela. It should formally reject the Juan Guaido experiment. But this is and in that kind of vein, Ben Roswell in the Globe and Mail. Ben Roswell is a former Canadian ambassador, and he was big proponent of the whole Juan Guaido thing in 2019. I wrote about him a bunch of times. And he then became the head of the Canadian, CIC, Canadian International Congress, Canadian International Council. And sort of this, historically, was this Canadian back. I wrote about it in the propaganda system book, as a Canadian government kind of aligned, think tanky kind of thing that has chapters across the country, at universities across the country. Basically sort of a networking place for generally a bit more on the liberal end of the foreign policy establishment. And that's what Roswell was or is. And so he has a piece in the Globe and Mail titled, "To Support Venezuelan Democracy, Canada Should Reopen Its Embassy in Caracas." And this is this piece that I've never read a piece, I don't think, where I disagree with more things in the article, but agree with the point. And he basically comes up with his analogy is like Pinochet's Chile and the Canadian embassy that existed in the late 80s in Pinochet's Chile became a place for Democrats to get together, and that helped to bring down Pinochet. So you've got that whole issue flipped upside down, and Canada's role in the coup against Allende and how it played, aligned with Pinochet for many years. So you've got that history flipped upside down. Then he's got timelines and when the Lima Group was created. He sort of suggests the Lima Group was created after the 2018 election. In fact, it was created about a year before that. And there's a whole series of things in the piece that just, I disagree with, or they're just factually incorrect, or seriously misleading. But the basic point is that the Canadian embassy should be reopened in Caracas. And the reality of what we're hearing from the Conservative government, and to a little bit lesser extent, Melanie Joly, and I think that's why she's not just doing what the Conservatives want, is it's a joke. We're just talking about going right back to what we did 4 years ago, right? Or 5 years ago. It's not from the standpoint of just it's not going to work, right? they know it. Poilievre can make as many aggressive comments as he wants. The Americans can say whatever they want about we recognize Gonzalez, but it's not gonna succeed, and it's just basically going backwards 4 or 5 years and just repeating the whole affair. On the question of Palestine, all kinds of horrible things. I don't know if people just saw this. Smoldrich just came out and said starving 2 million civilians to death in Gaza might be justified, quote, might be justified and moral. Might be justified and moral. But the world won't let us do it. That's the minister in the current government. I mean, the genocidal comments just an endless stream of these comments. On the health front, there was a report saying that 40,000 cases of hepatitis C or hepatitis A in Gaza since October 7th. In the same period last year, there were 85. Then I just saw Haaretz is reporting the period 100,000 cases of hepatitis B. I believe hepatitis B is more, hepatitis A is, not good, but I don't think it's not usually deadly. I think hepatitis B maybe worse. We obviously know this, right? All these health, 6 months, a year, 10 years from now, when the academics fully analyze all this, the numbers of deaths from the ailments that are created by the destruction is going to far surpass the actual killings, which in and of itself is at least 50,000. But the ailments are going to be even worse, and there's little evidence here and there posted in that direction. Now, this last week, I'm getting all dates all kind of mixed up of when it all happens because so many things are moving so rapidly here. But of course, They assassinated the political leader of Hamas in Iran. They blew up a top Hezbollah official in Beirut. The Israel, of course, is blew off the head of an Al Jazeera reporter, murdered another 30 or 40 at a UN school yesterday. In the last 24 hours, I think another 40 people killed. The killing machine in Gaza continues. Obviously, they keep stealing Palestinian land in the West Bank, and they've been bombing Syria for that matter. On top of all this, there's all these mysterious fires on the Iraq-Iran border at oil depots in Iraq, or sorry, in Iran, I believe, in the last recent hours, last day or so. Who knows who's exactly behind that? But now, in that context, Melanie Joly says what? Melanie Joly says Iran is destabilizing the region. That's what a statement she put out yesterday. And there was a G7 meeting, and they kind of more or less say that. She put out her personal statement after a G7, I guess, foreign ministers meeting. It's Iran destabilizing, right? Not Israel when Israel blows up the top ceasefire negotiator in Iran, it's Iran destabilizing. That's according to the Canadian government. This is everyone is expecting a fairly significant response. I mean, just at the border, just today, last hours, multiple, I think, Hezbollah killed, or I don't know if they killed, but seriously injured a couple Israeli soldiers, some Hezbollah fighters killed. That sort of low-level fighting that's been going on for many months is picking up, and everyone's expecting something bigger coming from Iran, Hezbollah, in response to Israel's recent escalations. The Canadian government is is going along with all this and framing it as if it's Iran's responsibility. On the Iran front, there was this report published by this Saudi-funded Iranian dissident media organization. I think it's Americans funded as well. And the headline is Iran masterminded anti-Israel protest in Canadian University. And they're claiming that the McGill encampment, which of course came after the hunger strike for 2 months that many students were on, came after the undergraduate body voting at almost 80% in the highest turnout in its history for this boycott resolution, which followed about 18 months earlier from 73%, I think it was, 72%, 71%, I forget exactly, 70+% voting for this other BDS resolution. The student body at McGill has shown very clearly they support boycotting Israel. They want action. And the student encampment flowed from that with the following a model that students in the US adopted, I don't know, I don't remember how long it was, but 2 or 3 weeks previously. And this media outlet is trying to claim this protest, this encampment at McGill is an Iranian plot. And the claim from it is that they say there was a whole, this group, American group, says there was a whole bunch of Twitter activity in Farsi about the encampment. Okay, so there's all this Twitter activity in Farsi about the encampment, and that somehow leads to Iran masterminding the encampment. Now, my guess is this data about all these tweets in Farsi about the encampment is just not true. But my guess is it's just some sort of fabrication, pro-Israel group, who knows, pro-empire group, I don't know, who comes up with. Okay, so it's probably just a straight fabrication. But even if it wasn't, what the hell does that have to do with masterminding the encampment? And first of all, the encampment is a physical thing. Okay, it wasn't just a social media thing. It was a physical thing. And like I said, it has this whole roots. It was very obvious where it came out of, following the US model. There's a whole McGill element to it. And now that okay, so you have this an anti-Iranian government media outlet publishing this, you go, okay, whatever, okay, they're just the cookie kind of media outlet, whatever. But it's picked up all over. It's picked up all over. See, just tweeting it out. They quote the Oberman, the lawyer there who's running for the Conservatives here, that Kevin Vaughn, proof. I spoke in House of Commons about how Iran is behind these protests months ago. Now we have proof of it. And he's tweeting out. I mean, it's like, honestly, this is Sam Cooper. Okay, Sam Cooper, the Global News former reporter who's like, China runs Canada. China's decides everything, and it's the Chinese networks are all over. He's this big foreign interference guy. He's just all over it. Okay, they've proven Iran is behind. It's unbelievable how embarrassing this is for there's this two different groups, which I don't know how they align themselves, but there's the foreign interference advocates and there's the Zionists. In principle, they should be actually at loggerheads, of course, because the so-called concern about foreign interference people should be like, well, what about Israel's interference? They aren't, because that's not what foreign interference means in the actual political discussion. It means China, Russia, like Iran, a little bit of India. Anyway, so this is there now. The Globe, the National Post does pick it up. They're not as like and apparently the journalist from this Iranian outlet, she just went on a fully paid trip by the former Canadian ambassador Vivian Barkovici, total crazy Zionist. I saw that 3-4 months ago. I think I may have mentioned it. She organized this tour of journalists, Canadian journalists, to Israel. Apparently, the journalist that wrote this story went on that. It's an Iranian background journalist who went on that trip. The National Post picked the story up. They weren't quite as, they were a bit more circumspect in how they did it. I think the title of theirs was Iran, Russia Among State-Stoking Anti-Israel Narratives in Canada, Experts. And their thing was more with Marcus Kolga, who's the Disinfo Watch guy at Macdonald-Laurier Institute. And then they had this data about these Farsi accounts later in the article. The Marcus Kolga says, over the past 9 months at Disinfo Watch, we've observed social media accounts that were previously posting aggressively anti-Ukrainian content, adding anti-Zionist content to their toxic mix. I would be exactly, Marcus Kolga would identify me as exactly one of these people who's obviously the last 9 to 10 months, less stuff to do with the NATO proxy war, more about anti-Zionist toxic mix. Anyways, this is the media sphere. It's the Neil Oberman, the lawyer, conservative candidate in the Mount Royal, where Housefather is going to go up against Housefather from Housefather's too easy on the Palestinians. That's how he's running to try to beat Housefather. He's a lawyer trying to get the encampment shut down, and he's quoted saying that basically, if the judges would have had access to this data of these Farsi Twitter accounts talking about the encampment, maybe the judges would have shut this down as a foreign interference op back 3 months ago. Anyways, it's pretty wild to see the degree of anti-Iranian kind of politics. And I should say that the Canada Files has a pretty good piece titled Iran International, that's the media outlet's called, Iran International, puts target on head of McGill Palestine encampment protesters. And we should point that out, that the bill C-70, this foreign interference bill, which seems, the more you see about it, the more dangerous this whole thing seems. This is going to potentially start getting legal stuff, right? That these students encampment, they're Iran proxies. And this runs afoul of the new legislation combating foreign interference, and there may even become sort of like legal elements to it. There's a story, I think the Globe said that this new in C-70, which again we're still learning bits about it, even though it's been passed, learning more and more about it. New law could mean jail terms for sharing military secrets. So they're saying that this C-70. There's been a whole kerfuffle about how I think there were some Canadian, Australian, maybe US former pilots or fighter jet, whatever, or Air Force pilots training in some school. I think in South Africa, there was Chinese pilots training there, and they're saying that doing this in the future, if you were a Canadian pilot that went and after leaving the Air Force, you went and trained Chinese pilots or whatever, that this could potentially run afoul of Bill C-70. So there's a lot in this foreign interference thing that's really a very repressive kind of dynamic. A couple other things on the Palestine question. The Maple has a piece titled as $95 million, a new Canadian military goods could flow to Israel by 2025. And so basically when they stopped the arms permits back in January, they allowed all permits that were already been submitted. And so basically that, according to Maple, that works out to about $100 million in exports. Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East had this post. I don't even remember where I saw it, but there's a bit in it that I thought is worth mentioning. It's something that I think doesn't get enough attention, which is the sort of military relationship and the sort of security relationship that Canada has with Israel. And they point out that back in 2014, there was the Israel Strategic Partnership that was signed through a memorandum of understanding, and that Canada collaborates with many different branches of Israeli state that are actively involved in maintaining its illegal occupation. For example, the MC Canada is supposed to collaborate with the Israel Ministry of Defense and Israel Ministry of National Security on issues including to military relations, joint military operations, defense procurement, counterterrorism, and cybersecurity. So basically, there's these relations between the defense ministry in different countries and other sort of security related ministries that are just sort of happening kind of below the surface. As I kind of understand it, I don't know much about it. I think it's something that deserves more attention. It probably might require some access to information and stuff like that. But there's this whole kind of collaboration, which I'm sure is happening in a pretty extensive way. We know there's a whole history of intelligence collaboration, but also in other kind of military, border services, etc. domains. The Canadian Jewish News has this piece about a Canadian Torontonian who's in a coma in an Israeli hospital. He got hit by, according to the story, by Hezbollah rocket fire. Shrapnel hit him, I guess, in the head on an Israeli base in occupied Lebanese territory. And that dates back to the Israel 67 war, disputed Syrian Lebanese territory question. And now, so the Canadian Jewish News does this piece about this kid, 20-year-old kid, grew up in Toronto, went to this school, B'nai Akiva schools, and I think they have an elementary, they have a girls' stream and a boys' stream for high school, and it's this religious, what they call a religious Zionist school. And I'd written about it a little bit previously. Now, a couple of things. Okay, first of all, this Canadian Jewish News interview replays an interview from his brother, who also is a lone soldier after going to Toronto High School, goes to Israeli military. They replays the interview from 3 years ago. And it's a totally remarkable interview because he boasts about how he was the top sniper in his unit that was basically mostly just in the West Bank. And he's boasting about how he's involved in checkpoints, arrests. I forget the wording, I don't have it in front of me, but had many experiences in the military, to say the least. Kind of hints at the fact he killed Palestinians, doesn't say that, but hints at it. And just this very kind of like militarist kind of whatever. Now, okay, so that's this kid. This kid should be investigated for under Canada's War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act. Now, in this interview in the Canadian Jewish News about the kid who's in a coma, they quote a mother of another kid in his class. Ben Brown is the name of the kid who's in the coma. The mother says that a quarter of the Toronto schools kids join the Israeli military. She talks about these plaques at the school celebrating all the alumni who went to the Israeli military. There is a school, a private school in Toronto, where a quarter of the kids are going to join the Israeli military. That, to me, is absolutely insane. I have a piece I submitted to Mondoise, we'll see if they publish it. I go into a whole bunch. I go into some of what I've already written about, but then some other stuff that Karen Rodman uncovered for a complaint. Now, this school is a registered charity. It gets federal government grants. It's got last couple of years in 2021, 2022, got over $1 million in federal government grants. So what was it? No, it was more than that. I think it was 3 million. Anyways, got some substantial amount of federal government grants. Almost all of its funding comes from other registered charities, so subsidized at least partly by tax receipts or tax receipted donations. Now, it's CRA rules on tuition for private schools is very clear. It is not, even if the school is a registered charity, it is not, you can't get a tax receipt for a tuition to go to a private school. You want to go some I don't know, Upper Canada College or whatever, it costs I don't know what it costs, but $40,000 a year. You're a parent, you pay that $40,000. There's little bits here and there you can try to write off, but basically you can't write it off, okay? Which I think is totally reasonable. Private schools shouldn't be subsidized in that way at all. But there's this sort of loophole for religion. And it's a little unclear to me. There's a lot of stuff out there on this, and I'm not a tax person, whatever. But basically, there's a way of getting that religious studies is tax receivable. And so this school is getting so much of its money, almost none of its money from non-receipted sources. So i.e. would just be tuition that there's no one getting just paying your tuition and you get no tax receipt. So this school, from what I can tell here, is basically it's acting like most of what it does is religious. It is a religious school. It is a religious school. But on top of this, it would be defining Zionism as religion, of course, right? They would be defining all of its pro-Israel campaigning, including inducing Canadian kids to join the Israeli military as religious studies. So these parents are getting tax receipts, they're paying their tuition. It seems like, I'm not sure about this, they're paying their kids' tuition, they're getting tax receipts for paying that, and they're defining kind of everything they do. Now, the school should be investigated for violating the Foreign Enlistment Act. When a quarter of the kids are going to the Israeli military, clearly they are inducing Canadian kids to join the Israeli military. The school, this network, the Ben Akiva Global Network, they actually have a facility in Israel that brings the kids there for a year to kind of prepares them for potentially joining the Israeli military. So it's not just they have these former soldiers come and speak. They have a whole bunch of ways in which they're clearly laying the groundwork to have these boys principally join the Israeli military. But then there's formal on the ground. And so this should be violated for the Foreign Enlistment Act. But on top of that, this whole charity thing is that it's they're getting a subsidy. The state, we're all subsidizing them for their violation of the Foreign Enlistment Act, because they would define inducing these kids to join the Israeli military as part of like their religious studies. And yeah, so anyways, this is any way you shake this thing down, it's unbelievable. There's a school where a quarter of the kids are ending up in the Israeli military from Toronto. I've gone on a bit too long here. I thought I wanted to mention really quickly on the Jewish National Fund. The Jewish National Fund with the charity status stuff. I'm doing this piece where they're basically saying they've kind of like got totally absorbed in their kind of like parochial interest of defending their charitable status. They're throwing the whole sector, all these Israel-focused charities, under the bus. And they responded to Canadian Jewish News story about them having the charitable status revoked by saying that there are, quote, dozens of Canadian charities working in the occupied West Bank. They call it the disputed territories. Dozens. So they're saying, oh, no, there's no problem with operating in the occupied West Bank, even though that's not correct. There have been charities that had their status revoked, and the courts have upheld the revocation based upon I think there's a little bit of grayness here in the law, but based upon operating in the occupied West Bank. So it's we knew that. We knew there were dozens of Canadian charities operating in the West Bank. This needs to be pursued aggressively. It's totally outrageous, and especially now with the International Court of Justice ruling saying that countries can't engage in that, can't be assisting. They have a legal responsibility not to assist. Clearly, subsidizing donations to West Bank colonies clearly defies the ICJ, very directly, the ICJ's recent ruling. It already violated Canadian policy previously, but it just reinforced that. What a couple other things. There's, yeah, I guess I'll just end with a couple things. So Vancouver Island University is taking their students to court to get an injunction. Today at McGill, so there's still encampment there at Nanaimo. Today at McGill, McGill, I didn't realize this, McGill campus has been shut down for like 3 weeks since they dismantled the encampment. Apparently for the first like 4 or 5 days after dismantling, it was complete shutdown. And then after that, they brought in a policy where you couldn't go on the campus unless you had a McGill ID. Anyone who knows the McGill campus is like, that's right downtown. It's like lots of people use it, just like walk through from sort of the McGill ghetto to downtown. It's like, a place that lots and lots of non-students would go every single day. I used to go to the McGill library basically every day. All that's been shut down. So today, the first day it's been back open without an ID. There was a little action. Multiple dozens showed up. They're kind of trying to scare the administration and threaten a re-encampment. There was this weekend in Montreal, there were a couple demonstrations still. I know other cities, big one. I saw fairly big stuff in Toronto. Toronto on Tuesday, there was, it seemed like hundreds, I think it was, participated in a shutting down of the arms companies for much of the day. So the mobilizations continue, but as do the horrors, and we possibly are on the brink of full-on regional war that Netanyahu clearly wants. He wants to suck the Americans into a full-on war. Biden seems to be obliging. We'll see what Iran and Hezbollah and the like do in the next couple of days. But it's perilous times here. I'll end it there, and if go ahead, Nadia, and I will try to find Laura to make her a. I've unmuted you, Laura. Nadia, you can go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you, what's the story behind the Prime Minister of Bangladesh resigned, and what's the story there? Is there Western interference as usual? I mean, what's happening there? I don't understand. And I wanted to know as well, not just in Bangladesh, but also in Sudan, there is trouble. Could you explain it a bit?
I don't know really what's going on in Bangladesh. I haven't followed closely. I've just, I've watched the Al Jazeera reports. I've, read headlines and, a couple articles in different Western corporate media. It seems like very repressive reaction to a protest movement, and the protest movement kept going, and the military stepped in. I think I saw something on Al Jazeera saying that they're not, protesters don't want the military to step in. With regards to Sudan, I think I have the broad outlines of what's going on in Sudan, and basically what I see is that there was, of course, a popular revolt that was successful, and but then the military basically, I don't know, superseded it, or uh, won. And then two factions of the sort of the military and the RSF, different armed forces had a falling out, and there are regional forces. I know there are different, regional. I think the UAE is providing weapons to the RSF, and but I basically see it as sort of two bad factions that are, fighting it out for power, while the sort of popular democratic forces are victimized and are clearly sidelined by it. But I haven't followed it very closely because I don't think Canada's plays, much of a role in the situation. It's quite significant humanitarian impact. There is, I believe the report saying that there's, a significant amount of famine. There's many thousands, probably tens of thousands, who've even been killed. And it's a pretty grim situation, but it's fairly tangentially tied to Canada.
Ali, could you please unmute yourself? Okay, great. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on the Bangladeshi situation. Just the gist of it is that the whole protest movement started because there was a quota system in place for government jobs. They call it the civil service. And back in 1971, when Bangladesh separated from Pakistan, the leader of Bangladesh, Mujibur Rahman, they instituted a quota system that 25% of the civil service jobs would be reserved for the freedom fighters of that time or their descendants. And there was a lot of corruption happening because of that. And there was a reaction from the students, particularly to that, and the government cracked down really hard, and that ballooned into a much bigger protest. Hasina Wajid, the outgoing prime minister of Bangladesh, she's the daughter of Mujibur Rahman, and she was already not a very well-liked leader, and that's where kind of things stand. And the last I checked this morning, the protesters were taking down a very large statue of the founder of the nation. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, and Hasina had been in power for a long time, back and forth with the other woman. It was kind of amazing. Can I just ask a question? But before I do, there was someone else I had asked to lower their hand, and they did, a woman, and then they disappeared from my screen. I hope something hasn't happened that's caused you to disappear. If it has, please come back on. I just wanted to ask you, because I know, Eve, that your wife Bianca was in Venezuela to observe the election. Did she talk about, I mean, it is the one thing that I have noticed, and again, I've told people I'm strongly support Maduro, and I'm sick of all the things the West has done to destroy him. But I do want to know, like, why they have not been able to report results by locality. I don't know if it was propaganda, but I did read an external article saying that in the past they've always done that, like, very quickly. And I know I heard there was maybe some kind of hack, but I don't know. Did she have any thoughts on why they have taken so long to? You still haven't seen that?
Yeah, I don't think she had any thoughts on that, but she did say that I asked that question specifically about the hack, and her what she got from being there and kind of everyone that the hack was actually worse than was being. They were downplaying the hack versus exaggerating the hack for their, because it's kind of embarrassing, look bad, whatever. That was her sense from the just being around, but she was at the CNE, the Electoral Commission or whatever. I do agree with you that I have some question marks on why, like the publishing. The law says they don't need to publish it. They still are fully within the legal, I think it's a month or something like that. So obviously what Maduro has done is said, bring it all to the Supreme Court and let the Supreme Court adjudicate the matter and whatnot, which, seems like a decent step, but I agree with you. I have some question marks about, let's get to the extent, like explain why the documents haven't been all published, or explain that, this is all going to this room. All these files are going to be coming out when it's handed over to the Supreme Court in next week or whatever, whatever that specific is. As far as I know, that hasn't been, I'm not following it close enough. I'm not like reading Spanish language press, like, go on to Venezuela analysis, trying to find out everything that I see on Venezuela analysis in recent days. I went to Telesur also to kind of look at some of that question. I'm not seeing that adequately answered. I listened to a debate on Democracy Now! Today, and I didn't really feel like actually either of the people were totally convincing. There was one saying it's, it was clearly a fraud, and I didn't feel like his arguments were totally convincing, but I also didn't find like the National Lawyers Guild person. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's still a question mark in my head. There's no question mark in terms of, there's no way that this was like, the Chavistas have whatever the number is. Is it, some people say 50%? Is it 40%? Is it 42%? Is it like, it's not, the country is divided, right? Like there is, so there's no way that Maduro was trounced like they claimed, all that kind of stuff. And all the business about the polls in advance or the exit polls, all that stuff, they've done the same game every single time. They claim the polls before, da 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 da. And even if you get into, like, Venezuela analysis had stories about this, about the polls, beforehand, showing that in fact, no, there's a bunch of polls showed that Maduro was in the lead beforehand. But all the polls that are quoted in the main media say completely differently. So there's that stuff's all, I think, not to be taken too credibly, but there is, I think, a real question mark about the release. I saw somebody break down the number. They're saying that he's saying he got 7 million votes, and there's basically kind of saying why there's no chance that's possible, and he kind of breaks down like how many votes Chavez got at the high point, which I think was right around 7 million, and then shows the numbers over the years of the opposition and this and that. So yeah, I think there's still a question mark out there. I don't have the answer to that, but yeah.
Yuri might have some insights. He's up next, and I know he interviewed Arnold August yesterday about Venezuela, and he was also an observer. Go ahead, Yuri.
Thanks, Laura. Yes, and yeah, I think definitely check out Orinoco Tribune has been publishing. I think they've been doing a lot of interesting work on Venezuela, for obvious reasons. I mean, Jesus is based there, and Arnold did a very Arnold August, who I interviewed yesterday, did a very brief article explaining how it's basically next to impossible for the Maduro government or any government to try to even pull off some kind of an election fraud. So I would suggest that people definitely, check out Orinoco Tribune and Arnold August's article there. And if you follow me at 1+1, I did post the link in the chat that people can check that out. And Arnold had I gave him the chance to sort of go more extensive about it. But the question I wanted to ask you, Eve, was related to Israel, and it might be a controversial one. So if you don't want to take up the answer, no problem, because it's a bit controversial. The question I'm about to ask, but it has to do with the whole, what's called like atrocity propaganda or atrocity like pornography. So Israel claims that that like Hamas like sexually assaulted hostages and stuff like that. And I believe your friend Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal, even people at Electronic Intifada, have kind of debunked that, saying that it's simply not true. You can criticize Hamas and the Palestinian resistance for kidnapping hostages and stuff like that, but that they simply did not commit that kind of atrocious kind of act to their prisoners of wars. I've personally not really gotten involved in that whole debate because I find it's a bit counter productive. But at the same time, when we think of Iraq taking babies out of incubators, when we think of the disgusting propaganda that was leveled at Gaddafi, that he was giving Viagra to soldiers to commit, mass rape, and all the other atrocious propaganda that was leveled at Assad. Do you think that actually is important to, debunk, debunk this, if there is, of course, if this is, of course, just grotesque propaganda, and if there's a half truth in it?
I think it's
I'm curious.
there is no victim. The New York Times even went to every single sexual assault center in Israel and couldn't find a victim. There's no name. There was a person just like a week ago, 10 days ago, that came forward, is the first claimed victim. And I saw the post kind of going into it, but there is no, not like dead or alive. Right. So I don't know. I think I agree with it's not just that's on Twitter, Aaron and Max have been some of the most aggressive, but Mondoise has done reporting on this, Electronic Intifada. It didn't happen. But we do know that there's lots and lots of rape taking place against Palestinians in jails by Israelis, right? So it didn't, on the surface of it, it just didn't ever make sense to me. It was a really time-sensitive operation, right? There is lots, the history of warfare, of course, is rape, sexual violence. But that's not it's not like you're in a special forces operation, you're going into a home and you're going to stop for some rape. It doesn't make any sense. And that's what the Hamas fighters were doing. Right? So they knew they had a very, very short window of time. So yeah, I wasn't really been involved in the debunking process. I'm mostly just reading what's published on X and some reports from different left outlets, and I've read some of the stuff from have you seen the thing with Roger Waters and Piers?
Oh no! I avoid Piers Morgan like the plague, because my blood pressure can't take his bull crap. But
well, so Roger Waters, so Piers Morgan's he's challenging the whole Israeli rape kind of thing, and he's saying, but there was all this terrible rape, and then Roger Waters starts kind of responding and he starts like quoting, he's like, I think it's called DACA. Is that the group's name? I believe the Israeli group. It's this sort of like far right group that's behind much of the rape allegations. And Roger Waters like brings it up, and Pierce Morgan's like, "Who's that?" And Roger Waters says, "Come on, you're kidding with me, right?" And Pierce, "No, I've never heard of it." And he's like, "Wait, why are we even having this discussion?" That's the source of Pierce Morgan's, like, Pierce Morgan doesn't even know the source of his claims of the rape. And right, so, and these are like fanatic. It's been, Electronic Intifada and others have documented these just total fanatics who are I think it's called DACA. I think this is the group's name. Somebody can confirm that. And they're just like, it's totally non-credible source. So yeah, I don't know like what, I don't like in the big scheme of where we are now, like I don't even know, like even if all the claims were true that Hamas had raped, we don't know a number that's being put out there, right? Even if the claim about the 40 babies in the oven that at one point was circulating around, even all those claims were like true, which they're not. I mean, there was brutality that happened. There's no doubt about that. There's people who are innocents who were killed, and many of them also were killed by the Israeli military. That's also very clear too. But it wouldn't really change, like it doesn't justify what Israel's been doing or whatever, right? But yeah, I think there's a political utility in telling the truth and trying to get to the bottom of the truth, right? And I think that the work that's been done on, if you want to call it debunking the rape claims, I think it's good journalism, and I think it's helpful to get a proper sense of what's actually happened and happening and all this kind of stuff. But yeah.
Okay, so we have 3 more people with questions, Eve. So go ahead, Yolanda.
Oh, sorry. My question is very brief and more to you being in Montreal. I have a friend who suggested to me that that from what she heard, there was a huge mess left by the students at McGill. And in Ottawa, when the encampment shut down, I mean, I found that everything was, I mean, there was an element of trash, but everything was left in really good condition. I found when I went to the encampments, they were nothing but respectful. So I'm just wondering, in terms of McGill, was it when they were shut down, was there, for somebody living there, were you aware of a huge mess that was left behind?
It was a very orderly camp. I wasn't there in like the hours just before, or even can't remember how many days it had been since I'd been there. The camp was very orderly all the times I was there, and I was there, I don't know how many times, dozens of times. The Montreal Gazette yesterday. So the administration claimed there was like all this drug use taking place, and they claimed there was overdoses. They claimed 2 overdoses in early July on the campus, and they kind of associate with the encampment. The Montreal Gazette yesterday, the day before's paper, or sometime last week, they put in an access information request on the private security company that McGill hired to do the final dismantling. Ultimately, it was really the police that did it all, but there was this kind of like legal gray area so the police didn't do the actual taking down the encampment, gave this private security company. It has to do with the whole injunction, Anyways, the McGill refuses the access to information request, even though universities are under access law around what the private security company found at the encampment. So McGill was going around publicly saying there's all this drug use, there's all this like, whatever mess, it was like a whole chaos, whatever. And but then they don't want to release what the private security company found in terms of all that stuff. early on, about 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the encampment, McGill claimed there was a whole problem with like sewage, and I think there was a truth in it. They tried to at one basically McGill was blocking them from blocking them from using the toilets, like in usual toilets in university, and then was basically making it difficult to get rid of the sewage. And early on, there was tons of rain. Anyway, so there were some real issues, but they were in large part because McGill was making life difficult for the encampment to deal with the problem of human waste and this and that. On the like drugs thing, like actually, I went to the UCAM encampment, and the McGill was clearly they took the no alcohol policy very seriously. I actually think I was joking about this today with somebody. I think a big chunk of people who went to the UCAM encampment, there was political differences, but I actually think a big part of the difference was the first night when I went to the UCAM encampment, people were like openly drinking. I actually think a big part of the difference was that there were people who were at the McGill encampment that wanted to be able to drink, and they couldn't. And so they went to the McGill encampment. So more than an ideological difference, it was over the right to be able to drink at the encampment. So anyway, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there were problems with some waste here and there, and I don't doubt that McGill incurred all kinds of extra costs and stuff like that from. Ultimately, it was a total mess because they busted it up, right? They blocked the students from and everyone else from accessing it. So there was tons of like fence and tents and all that kind of stuff that were left, of course, because how could it not be when they came in and they blocked it all off and then they put it into dump trucks and whatever, right? I also actually today it was like saying went to the they put new grass in the where the encampment was, and I also but I was there the first day, and it was not the encampment didn't cause the grass problem. That's been like that. I think every summer they usually maybe replace the grass. Anyways, the point being, I'm sure there was lots of costs that were incurred by McGill for all this stuff, and but no, the basic was that they were trying very hard to be sort of clean and whatever.
Now, I had you keep disappearing. I don't know if you mean to disappear, but if not, just speak up now. And if you did, then we'll go ahead. And Nadia, do you have another question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to go back to the story about the babies killing. I think this was just a pretext for Israel to do the barbarism, the barbaric response to this kidnapping. Because remember, there was one woman who was released shortly after they were kidnapped, and she was saying bluntly and boldly and speaking out in the media that she was very well treated, an elderly woman. And of course, Israel shut her up very fast, and we never heard from her again. But this is what she was saying, that she was very well treated and there were no problems. She was getting the medication she needed and the medical attention she needed, and she was very well treated. And of course, they shut her up very fast. So I think it was just a pretext as the 40 babies who were in the incubators of the Iraqi story that permitted the US to invade Iraq. This was the same story that, now they're killing our babies, so we need to get back at them. So I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly. There's lots of the memes there. Maybe it was a month ago, 6 weeks ago, there was the Palestinian who was like released from one of the Israeli detention centers, which now B'Tselem just came out with a report. They're saying they should be called torture camps. All, not just that one, whatever that one where they were shoving the stick up the guy's ass and raping him, and the wife of the person who raped the Palestinian prisoner came out with a statement supporting her husband raping the Palestinians, and then the Knesset had a whole discussion about, do we have the right to rape these Palestinians, and the conclusion was, yeah, we have the right to rape them, we have the right to do whatever we want to them. Anyways, insane stuff, like completely bananas insane. anyways, 6 weeks ago when that Palestinian guy was released, he was clearly totally and utterly traumatized.
Mm.
And they were showing, there was all these memes on Twitter about like that guy versus those released by Hamas. And like the Palestinian is just like, clearly totally traumatized, and the Israeli is like happy, smiling. And it was like the contrast was like, those who are called the barbarous in our media are the ones who actually treat the hostages or the kidnapped well, and then the Israelis treat them in this totally horrendous way. And it's not that it's a question of power. That's the issue at hand here, and obviously everyone who knows anything about this issue knows that Hamas is very weak relative to the Israeli strength. But yeah, there's no doubt that there was a huge amount of atrocity. I think atrocity porn or propaganda that was the term used to justify all this slaughter. But
And there was also I think the Israel itself and the Haaretz newspaper, the Haaretz newspaper itself debunked this nonsense, and so did the New York Times after repeating what Netanyahu had said, and then they did some investigation and they debunked what this whole nonsense. So I don't know how.
What Haaretz about 6 weeks ago, a month ago, they reported on the Hannibal directive.
Yes.
And they confirmed what had been reported widely by Mondoese, by Electronic Intifada, by Gray Zone, that the Hannibal directive, which is the Israeli directive of killing hostages so they can't be taken as hostages because then they can be used for political leverage against Israel. That was widespread employment of that right away, early on the day. I think they said sort of like said by 7 a.m. the first. So Israel clearly killed dozens and dozens of the Israeli civilians that were killed by Israeli forces. That's just absolutely 100% confirmed. There is no doubt about that. The number is not exactly, we don't know like a number, but dozens and dozens is confirmed. And so Haaretz has absolutely confirmed that reporting that goes back months ago in the left media. And a bunch of them, the left media, like the people on in Gray Zone, they Max and Aaron, they point out repeatedly they were smeared like really widely for reporting this stuff, and then it's all gets confirmed months later, and now it's like sort of for people who would delve into it, still in the broad popular mind, it hasn't seeped into the broad popular mind, but for people who delve into it, it's now kind of like known, and apparently in the Hebrew media it was being reported in Hebrew many months ago, but yeah, so
Okay, I think that's it, Eve. Thanks very much. Bye all.
thank you.
Bye.